Hello, students and family members. It's Mr. Panza. We continue to research and read about and learn about how we can tell time in two different ways. Let's start with the main question here where we're discussing two different ways to tell times, just like there are many ways to write a number. So I refresh the students' memories on the fact that you can write a number in standard form, expanded form, or written word form. Well, when you're reading a time off of a clock, you can read it the regular way, or as I like to call it, the smart way. We'll check out a few different ways specifically on how we use the smart way when we're talking about quarter of hours and quarter after hours. If you break up the clock and you think of it like a pizza, you can think of it as four different quarters. Like a personal pan pizza can be separated into four equal slices, a fraction, 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, and 1/4. And the clock can be made up of those four equal slices as well, because just like there are four slices on this small pizza, there are four pieces in the clock. We can number them like this. This would be the first quarter, this would be the second quarter, my third one would be right here, and my fourth one would be up in the upper left-hand corner based on how a clock's hands move in the clockwise direction. At the same time, when we're thinking about that pizza, we know those quarters make up different parts of the actual hour. I've got 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and 4/4, but they don't actually make up a full dollar. We're not talking about 100 pennies anymore. We're talking about minutes. And in minutes and in time, we're talking about a total of 60 minutes. So breaking 60 up into four quarters is much different than breaking a dollar up into four quarters. So for example, if I have 1/4 in the upper right-hand quarter, we're not talking about a fourth of 100, we're talking about a fourth of 60. And if you multiplied 1/4 of 60, you would come up with 15. In other words, each quarter of a clock is made up of 15 minutes, and that can sometimes be confusing, but at the same time, it's very helpful. Because if I have a quarter and a quarter, I've made up a half, which is, we'll get into that in just a bit, why we call this half past. And then on the opposite side of the clock, you have another quarter and the final quarter to make up four total quarters of a clock. And 15 minutes and 15 minutes is your half hour or 30 minutes. 15 more would get me to the 45-minute marker. And then finally, my final 15 minutes would get me to 60 total minutes on a clock. So I do want you to be thinking about quarters, but not necessarily these dollar and cent quarters. Instead, 15 minutes would equal 1/4 of a clock. To further illuminate this example, anytime we see a clock, I want you to be able to separate it into two, and then also separate it into four. Those four quarters will help you determine the smart way of reading and writing a clock. At the very top, we know that if it hits the 00, we call that the o'clock hour. If it's at the very bottom, we've hit half past the hour or 30 minutes. If it's over on the right-hand side at the 15-minute marker, we call that quarter after. The visual quarter will hopefully help you remember that that is the word I say before after. And over here on the left-hand side, we have quarter before of, or I also like to mention the word till, because then if I'm using the acrostic style poem, B-O-N-T are the letters that I see right here on the left, which makes it quarter bot. Quarter before, quarter of, or quarter till. All are appropriate to use. And that's because when I've hit the first 15 minutes, we are quarter after a certain hour. When I've hit the back 15 minutes, we're now quarter before, or 15 minutes before the next hour. When I've hit down low here at the 6, we're talking about half past the hour. Now, when we put the minute hand and hour hand on this clock, you should hopefully be able to see when my minute hand is at the 3, it's quarter after. When my minute hand is at the 9, it's quarter before. And when my minute hand is at the 6, we're at half past. And anytime I have my minute hand at the top, we're at the o'clock. That's at the 12. With that being said, we can see a whole bunch of different examples where my minute hand is placed at either the 3, the 9, or the 6. And anytime it's placed at the 3, like in my first example here, second one, and third, I should immediately refer back to my clock. Because it's placed at the 3, I can remember that anything that is placed at the 3, anytime my minute hand is stretched all the way and is hitting that 3, I should begin saying the smart way sentence as quarter after. In this sense, I then look at the hour hand, which is pointing at the 1 o'clock hour. And on the after side, which is the right-hand side of the clock, it's quarter after the current hour that it is in. So if this was written this way, the regular way, 1:15 on a digital clock, we wouldn't say 15 minutes after 1, we would say quarter after 1 o'clock. In a similar fashion here, we have our hour hand pointing at the 8, I believe, and then the minute hand pointing at the 3. Anytime that minute hand is pointing at the 3, I refer back to my clock and think quarter after, and in that case, what time? Either 7 or 8. In this case, I was right the first time. This hour hand is pointing at the 8. Again, my minute hand pointing at the 3, and even if the hour hand is pointing at the 3, I refer back to my clock. I start with the quarter after smart way of saying things and recognize that it is quarter after 3 o'clock. In each of these bottom 3 examples, I refer back to my clock and I recognize that it is now 15 minutes either before of or till the next hour, or quarter before the next hour. This hour hand, you can see, is moving in between the 1 and 2, which means I'm getting closer to the 2 o'clock hour, so this would be quarter before 2. This one here is moving towards the 7, so this is quarter before 7 o'clock because we are 15 minutes before 7. And finally, this one is moving towards the 10, so we're talking about 15 minutes or quarter before 10. Let's see if I'm right. Quarter before 10. Quarter before, well, that one's incorrect, and quarter before 2. This one, I believe, was just marked incorrectly. So recognizing these quarters will surely help you when you are trying to write time. If you can refer back to this clock and recognize that I have o'clock, quarter after, half past, and quarter before, you'll be able to answer and tell time in 2 different ways and write it the smart way. Thanks. Hope this video helps.